This is a digital print with a. It's coming up. A digital print with a silk screen over it. It's not. No, I still have it. Right.
Are you in the same screen or?
Yeah, I'm.
Because we're still seeing the same image here.
The same, yeah, with different.
If you go down to share screen, oh, there you go. Oh, okay.
Yeah, now it's here.
Oh, that's screen printed over. I think what's really interesting, Nicholas, is that sometimes, like particularly in digital, like web and Instagram, it can look so. It looks so digital. And I'm wondering about, like you said that there are these flaws inside of it and things, and I'm wondering about like how do you consider those flaws, and have you thought about exaggerating some of the flaw a little bit to remove the perception? Or?
Yeah, I mean exaggerating. Yes, what I use a technique. I can only use it on wood because on canvas I mean just doesn't work. I paint, like for backgrounds, I paint like 5, 6, 7, 8 layers of paint of different colors, and in much of the cases I end up painting white over it in the end, and then I scratch the whole thing. So which gives me a very interesting structure of little bits of colors of the layers that are under it.
Okay.
So and when you the cool thing, I really, when I paint the layers, I give a lot of structure to the layers of paint, which allows me when you scratch in the end, all those layers who have their different texture, they're gonna melt into one final layer, who is actually very smooth to touch. It feels like I don't know the word in English, but you almost don't feel the texture anymore. But the texture becomes very visual, and but it's actually smooth to touch it. It's really soft to touch it. I like touching paintings. I even try in museums to touch paintings when I can.
You could do that in Mexico. Actually, I actually see people, especially on Sunday on days. If you go to a museum here, you'll see like people just like reach out and touch, like start touching it, and I've actually slapped people's hands. Oh, Boca.
But yeah. Anyway, to get back to what we were saying, I mean, this actual piece is also talking about. I mean, here I deliberately put an image behind the letters who are transparent, which means, let's say, it means nothing. I'm telling in the work that it means nothing what is behind it, but it's no problem. So I mean, I'm not going to read the whole text. I think you can read it, or should I read it out loud, the text?
No, we can read it. We're reading it.
Yeah. So here I'm playing actually with I mean, there's I made a painting too, saying I will show it in a minute. I made a painting because I mean, obviously you see big galleries showing work. Obviously, I don't like all the work that is in big galleries. I mean, sometimes we should be able to say that is really crap. I mean, that's really badly painted, or that's about nothing. I mean, I think there is no problem in saying if work is really bad. So I made a paintings where I put the phrase "how to paint whatever and get away with it," which obviously has a double meaning.
I think we lost your audio.
I'm not muted here.
No, you're fine. It just dropped out for a second. We lost you at the word "how." Sorry.
Yeah, so my painting is saying how to paint whatever and get away with it. So obviously that has the double meaning of, I mean, I am thinking about some work that I really hate from the bottom of my heart because I think it's really bad, but it's anyway in a big gallery and it's selling for millions. So that's really cool for the guy who's making, or the girl in this case, because it was a woman making terrible paintings. I won't tell you the name unless you really ask me to it. But then obviously I'm making a painting which has the phrase how to paint whatever and get away with it, which with which I put myself in the position of the vulnerable artist who is making something hoping that people like it, but maybe they say this is crap. So, and here I'm in the work that we have on the screen now. I really decided to take an image. I mean, the picture that is behind is actually of a motel room that I took years ago. When I'm in ugly hotels, I take pictures of the ugly hotel room. So I just decided to put whatever kind of image. I mean, obviously selected on color and on atmosphere, but then cover practically the whole image up with the text talking about that it's art that has no meaning. And then the little twist in this one is that, I mean, I show this one piece saying, okay, we should not make a habit of making art that means nothing. It's okay just for this one. But the idea is actually to present this in an exhibition with 15 times the same piece next to each other to make that it's not an exception. I'm already copying myself 15 times to not make it an exception. So I'm again criticizing. I mean, criticizing other work, but I'm
the idea of that you were talking about the paintings, the lettering that people do on walls here in Mexico, and your work. I mean, you're doing it in a different medium and a different context. But have you thought about merging those and doing something like a public installation?
Yeah, to be really honest, I would love to do some. I have some designs because at some point I was in some project to do a few murals. Was with other artists too, and it was like kind of a social project where people would participate. So I made a few designs that was going to be very cool, but then some people got politically involved, and the whole project went down. Yeah, but I mean, they actually did it, but the politicians that were entering the scene wanted to decide what the mural would look like. So yeah, there was not really a point of being there. And in the case of the murals, yeah, the idea was to play with some critique on murals.
What an interesting city to play with a critique on murals, because there's murals.
Yeah, because
everywhere.
I mean, there's murals everywhere here.
Even I've done a mural in Mexico City, yeah. So that tells you how frequently murals get done.
Yeah, so look at that. I mean, so it can really be whatever.
Right, exactly. You know, we're approaching about an hour of time right now. Nicholas, I would like to kind of throw it back to you. Do you have questions for us, you know, about what we're seeing, or is there anything that you want to direct back at us so that we can answer questions for you?
Yeah, first of all, I want you to tell me how amazing it is, my work. Obviously, that's a first. So let's do like 15 minutes of fame of that, and then we can.
Okay, Mr. Trump.
No, no. No, but yeah, knowing obviously how all the other participants are doing with that issue of being alone in a studio, not being able to come out. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being alone in a studio. I like working on something and be calm and have nobody around me. That is obviously not a problem. But yeah, getting
yeah, I know that each of the people who are here have a perspective on that,
Where
because
do-
we've all had that conversation.
Yeah.
Melissa, why don't
Where
you
do
talk
you-
about that?
where does the input come from at a certain point? Because somebody was saying, like in the beginning, yeah, I mean, working all the time helps, which is true, because when I was working on a lot of pieces at the same time, which is quite handy for me, because I mean, I do the thinking before, and then I have a few things ready, and then I can paint for a week without having to think. And the cool thing is, in that moment, you are thinking about next pieces that could come to mind, because you are actually, I mean, sometimes I don't know if it's smart to say, but sometimes, or at least for me, painting, the actual act of painting is, like, in my work, the easiest part, let's say. Like, I don't have to think when I'm painting, but I mean, I have time to think when I'm painting. So there's actually a lot of new pieces that get prepared while I'm painting another one. But in this case, yeah, I got my list of texts, and then my bunch of input has disappeared a bit. So I'm really interested to know how other people deal with that.
Sure. Let's open this up. Melissa, you're working in some work right now, some underwater portraits and things, and we had a really interesting conversation a couple of days ago about that. What's the effect of the quarantine on your working right now, and how are you mitigating it? Like, what are you able to mitigate it yet, or like, what's your?
I feel like I'm just starting to get kind of into a groove of things. It's kind of like my work stopped. Like, I stopped having to go to work, so all of a sudden I have all this time. And with that, I feel like it came all this pressure, like I should be super productive, but also
Right.
The world's ending and it's kind of stressful and weird. So there's a few like competing things going on. It's like partly really positive though, I feel like, because the economy is shut down like so completely. And I mean, we didn't probably choose to be artists because we wanted to make a lot of money. So I feel like there's suddenly this, like, it makes sense what we're doing, and it seems like people are interested in art even more right now, or it's more important, even like these little videos that people make of just themselves doing goofy stuff in wherever they're locked down. It's like, I feel like it's what's getting us through. And I mean, to me, that's art as much as anything else.
Sure,
Whatever
sure.
people are making.
And have you been able
I
to?
don't know. I mean, it just like it feels like it makes sense just to be creating stuff. Makes like so much more sense in the current circumstances.
That's
so what were you gonna ask, Michael?
Oh no, Nicholas was going to say something.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. That's a really good point. I never thought about it like that. But yes, there's like more. People are more interested and more looking for stuff that we are that for us is really natural to do, but now all of a
It's kind of
sudden
like
people,
in the current circumstances, it's like we're returning to the basics of survival, and like art is a huge part of that, you know? It's like right now, so many things have been shut down. Like we need to make sure we maintain our access to like food, shelter, water, and art, really.
Right.
You know,
And
healthcare,
that comes in a
these
lot
kind of
of,
things,
I mean,
like that's kind of what it's come down to, like our lives. You know? I mean, a lot of the
right.
art I consume, to be honest, is TV shows and movies and music. Like, but even so, I mean, I feel that that is art. It's content. It's stimulating. It's reflecting our human experience. So yeah, I do. I really feel like that's what our lives have been reduced to. Yeah.
well, reduced is maybe not the word.
Yeah.
Expanded.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean,
Yeah.
and sorry, because the tone of what you're saying is very positive, and I think that's really important to find like a positive way to view like what's happening, because there's so much negativity right now too, and I think the negativity can shut down the creative process. So the fact that so many people are creating is a really good way to contextualize it. It's like, okay, right, you know,
Yeah,
as I term it, it's a creative pandemic.
And the piece that I found really provocative was on Nicholas's website that I see here, the one that says, now that everyone is so afraid to die, what are we going to do with all of this art? I find that very provocative, because there's a lot of feelings mixed in with all of this, like fear of dying. Fear of dying, fear of losing people, just the kind
Fear of not being able to connect.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard sometimes. Also, kind of hard sometimes to create artwork when you don't know if there's an actual audience. So you kind of lose your way a little bit. You're like, oh, if I'm not producing for a show, or you know, if people, what if nobody ever sees it? You know, like
who wants a painting anyway? I mean,
right. Would you like a loaf of bread, or would you like a painting of a loaf of bread? What about you guys in London there? Like, what's your relationship to the quarantine? You mentioned before that you're being a little bit more productive because you had the time to do it now. What are there issues coming up for you guys, and you know, how are you addressing them? And are you?
I guess being in the like where we live, like being like, I suppose being creative in the same space as where I work from, and where my domestic space is now my creative space, and I lecture at a university, and so all of our teaching is done online. So my home space is now my workspace, my kind of creative space, my private space, my public space, and almost so my domestic space. So I think that's really interesting how these spaces are taking on multiple usages. Maybe it's also maybe times of day when I say, right, I'm going to make sure that this is the time when I spend doing this, and then maybe it's about structure or routine. I don't know, but I quite like those blurring of those boundaries as well.
Yeah, I know a lot of some other artists that I've spoken to, because they have a discipline around the way that they produce their work. They've said that that discipline that they had already established has kept them productive during this time, even when even at moments when they don't feel like working, they're compelled to work just because that's the habit that they have. So I think sometimes, you know, creating like a clock in, clock out sort of attitude about it, like I'm going to work, you know, for these number of hours today and see what comes out of it, can be kind of helpful as well. I know that's what I'm doing that myself. I mean, I've been producing a lot of work, but not as much as I normally do. There's been a lot of distraction, obviously. But it's been, I constantly, I mean, I'm like, you know, I have a list of Post-it notes in front of me right now, trying to remind me of all the things that are out there to be done. But also, like, I you know, I wake up with the intention. I'm like, okay, today I'll spend 2 hours, you know, in the classroom environments doing those sort of things, but I'm going to spend, you know, I'm going to offset that for 3 hours of, you know, working in the studio. And I've literally had to start making lists of even the task orientation of like, okay, I'm going to apply epoxy today to this piece, and I'm going to touch up this particular area of a piece. I've actually had to, you know, rely on Post-it notes and stuff. Yeah, tried to list it digitally, which normally works for me. That's not working. So now I'm like on paper because it visually is in front of me. So those are like some of the things that I'm trying to do just to keep myself moving forward.
I like
you know,
the oh sorry, I was just gonna say about how do we cope. I like the humor and the absurdity in Nicholas's work. I think the humor is really important as a coping mechanism right now.
I totally agree.
Otherwise, we might all go mad.
Yeah,
Because what he's saying is really silly and really stupid, but it's very, very serious at the same time. It's really
I really try to
and I think you're
use
quite clever
humor
at that.
in. Yeah, that's also a bit why I'm chewing on texts for so long, to make sure that that they are well thought of, and that there is a part